Thank you for joining us today as we set the stage for the industry behind the trade show. I think one of the things we've always wanted to be able to talk about is how big is this space? So we all come to these trade shows, whether it's Infocom, ISE, et cetera, and we're curious about what's going on, what's driving this industry, how big is the phenomenon, what's the growth rates, where's the opportunity set? We're going to share some slides with you today, a little bit about that. My name is Sean Wargo. I'm Senior Director of Market Intelligence at AVIXA. I'm joined by Peter Hansen. He's our economics analyst. So, as you can tell from those titles, we wanted to give you a little feel for macroeconomic trends shaping the industry, the forecasts that are actually driving it, and tell you a little bit about the various data sources that we have. Pull up our slides. Let me back up for a second. Those of you not familiar, we are from the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association, a tongue twister to say the least. You perhaps know us for many different things. One of those is we are part owners of the ISE show you're here to see. We also do standards work, education, we have our certification program, CTS, and of course now we are doing a renewed take on market intelligence and economic perspectives. So what that means is, we've taken another look at research that we've always done as an association. We always did sizing studies to be able to tell the story of the industry. Over the last couple of years, we've actually revitalized that to be able to provide an even more guided perspective on what's happening, what are the trends driving this space. So one of the great things about these trade shows and the research is that we really find that technology, AV, is everywhere. What drives ultimately growth is the fact that we show up in so many spaces. And that can be everything from the classic conference room, where we're seeing new technologies show up with flagship displays, audio systems, et cetera, collaboration technologies. We're seeing reinvention or reimagining of education spaces. So in this case, an idea garden or an ideation room where students can actually interact with each other, interact with content to be able to learn in new and engaging ways. Of course, we're all familiar with sports stadiums and the technology that's being instituted there. In the United States, of course, we have this display wars going on with putting larger and larger LED displays on premise to be able to engage the audience and pull them into the experience in exciting ways. That even translates out to the seating areas. So displays put to be able to follow along, to get information for wayfinding, audio systems, et cetera. The broadcast facilities and production rooms that allow us to distribute that content out beyond the venue and to those remote viewers. And now we're even seeing in experience venues like museums and other sorts of places, hospitality, the use of AV to further engage customer in new and creative ways, whether it's information systems or AV as art kinds of installations. Hospitality is, of course, a big area. So with the proliferation of displays, the affordability of displays, the form factors, resolutions, et cetera, we're seeing displays show up across venues, restaurant, food and beverage types of locations where people can interact with content as they interact with each other. Even in our hotel rooms, of course, we now have streaming services, Alexa for voice control, larger displays to be able to interact with content, the ability to stream in your own content to be able to watch what you want. Retail is being reimagined to compete against the online opportunity where consumers have a perfect market of information to be able to find what they're looking for, find those products. So this picture taken in a mall nearby us from Washington, D.C., a mall called Tyson's, where there's a Dyson store where they've incorporated lighting, audio, and screens to engage the customer and create a destination for them. So it becomes retailtainment, something where people will seek out, rather than just sit in their living room, actually go and learn about a brand. My favorite of all, of course, live events. This was a picture I took with my son at his first conference, a concert for Green Day, where we were sitting, of course, way back. But this is perhaps the cutting edge of technology where live events professionals have to, like Formula One race car drivers, are pushing the technology to their limits and using it in creative new ways. So all of this shapes up our industry. So we're now going to talk through some of the data behind what we're seeing. Those are the inspirational trends that we note as to why our industry is growing. And you'll see some of those data points in just a moment. We have a wide range of research. Peter's here to talk about some of our macroeconomic series, really answering this question of what is the outlook of demand for AV products and services? What's the context in which we live in? Things like GDP, employment metrics, et cetera. Even more near-term issues like Brexit or tariffs, et cetera. Those kinds of things and how that shapes what's happening in our space. We're going to share most from our Industry Outlook Trends Analysis reports, and this answers that question of what are the biggest opportunities for growth. So as you walk around the show floor, kind of providing you some contextual information about, well, just how big is that opportunity? How much are displays a part of the infrastructure, the opportunity for us? How is that being shaped into solutions? We have other research that we won't really touch much on today, but in terms of market opportunity analysis, looking at specific vertical market applications, how as providers do we dig into those, harness those, capitalize on those? So we have a wealth of data about things from hospitality, transportation, education, corporate, et cetera, to really dig deep into those vertical markets. Some other data series, we do track some employment metrics for our space to look at skills and career path development. And then we have a monthly business index that you will see in just a moment. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter, who's going to walk us through some of the contextual information.
Hey everyone. So we're going to start off by talking here about GDP because it is the foundation for AV. Our industry spreads across so many different vertical markets, as you saw in the photos, so many different regions, so many different flows of spending, both operational expenditures and capital expenditures, that sort of necessarily reflects the economy as a whole. That can be a challenge. Global growth slowed in 2019 to like the mid 2% globally. Regionally, there's some variation as well. The Americas, around 2%, staying really steady likely in 2020. The EMEA region, our location here, has been one of the slower growing regions, but it's actually somewhat of a bright spot in that it was at about 1.3% in 2019, but we're anticipating faster growth in 2020. Good news for increasing revenue. And then APAC is kind of historic recent years, the leader in GDP growth, 4.4% in 2019, something similar in 2020. Now, AV between growing technology, creativity, advancing solutions and capabilities of what AV can do and what role it plays in each of these vertical markets that Sean's shown photos of, will outpace GDP growth, as Sean will highlight later. But when we talk about that, you'll notice that the AV growth by region reflects this GDP growth, that APAC has the highest growth, EMEA and the Americas are a little behind, though also growing at a strong pace. Another point I want to make about the GDP numbers that you're seeing, 2.6% last year globally, something similar next year, maybe a little bit higher. It can be a little disappointing compared to what you might want to get out of your businesses. But we've been running in this general range for over a decade now, and that's great for businesses. I hear people ask for more, and I just want to stress that having a few years of 4 or 5% growth followed by a year of recession is going to be a lot tougher on your business than a few years running of 2 or 3% growth. And a few years running of 2 or 3% growth uninterrupted by a recession will often add up to more than 4 or 5% years. That ends in a bubble bursting and a bad turn down. Talking about recessions, it's an important topic for the macroeconomic context. It's one of our main subjects of research. Historically, a lot of market researchers have used construction as sort of a primary indicator for AV. It makes sense in that a newly constructed building, office building, stadium, whatever, will need to have the AV integrated after it's constructed and before it's open to the public. That's kind of a scary thought if you know about the construction industry and what happens in recessions. It's based on capital expenditures, really profit-driven expenditures. It suffers greatly when the economy hits a downturn. during the most recent recession, the Great Recession, new construction dropped about 30% in the United States from peak to trough. We don't want that in AV, so we did a big research project on it last year, found a couple of good data sources, and they told us that AV tracks much closer to GDP. GDP dropped globally and in the United States about 4-5%, and it seems that AV dropped a similar percent. Now, obviously, you would like to see continued growth, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can change your business, adjust strategy to try and achieve that similar growth. But 5% is going to be a lot better for your business than 30%. Smart businesses are going to be able to tighten their belts and survive that GDP level drop as opposed to that 30% new construction style drop. That would really be a wrecking ball for the industry. Speaking about those kind of strategies, what's safe in a downturn? Project types, think about maintenance, renovation, as opposed to new construction. If you're getting money from operational expenditures as opposed to capital expenditures, you're going to do better no matter the vertical market. Broken systems will need to be fixed as long as the office has people in it, as long as it's in use, doesn't matter the economy. In terms of vertical markets, this year, coming out this month, we just did a market-by-market look at sort of total demand in each of 9 key vertical markets. We found a few that have historically, over the last recession, grown quite strongly despite a downturn. Government, a leader as political leaders face a lot of pressure to boost demand, keep the economy going strong. Healthcare, sick people still need to have their health taken care of, same way as a broken system. And then education, demand for education will spike as employers lift standards to try and sort through a large number of applicants, and people will try and boost their resumes, when they lose their job and they want to get their next job, get a little extra education. Sean referenced this. This is our business index. I want to talk about this because it kind of shows a little bit how the macro context has translated into Pro AV so far. Each month we pull our global AV Insights community and ask them about month-to-month change in sales and employment at their company. We use these two we use this survey, to calculate 2 diffusion indices, which are calculated by adding together the percent reporting a significant increase to half the percent reporting no change. So a score of 50 is sort of neutral, no net growth. Good news, we've been above 50 for the past couple of years. 2019, with that steady, moderate AV growth globally, saw a very steady performance in the sales index, right around 60, maybe a little above on average throughout the year, which is very good for businesses to keep seeing those sales increasing month to month and year over year. The employment index tends to be just a little under sales index. You're not always changing your payroll. We're going to talk a little bit later. Labor market's pretty tight for talent, so it's a little underneath, but you're seeing scores of around 60, maybe a little below for the employment index.
Thanks, Peter. So all of that put together, whether it's GDP, whether it's indices that we're watching and getting reports on from a sales perspective, how individuals are doing, then translates into this sizing figure for our industry. We've drawn a very large circle. One of the things we like to say is we try to be very inclusive of not just what would have been considered very traditional AV, so audio, video technologies, displays, speakers, microphones, etc., but also try to include some of those technologies that may be newer to some of those in the traditional AV space, whether that's back-end IP-based systems, IT networks, infrastructure, media servers, all those sorts of things are also part of this definition, as you'll kind of see as we pull apart the layers of our research. All of that considered, and looking at the GDP figures, we come up with this figure of about $247 billion as a global market for Pro AV. So that's us, that's this space, that's ISE, that's Infocom, that's all the shows that happen around the world, kind of existing within this market, this tremendous market for Pro AV products and services. This represents what end users, the customers of our market, would spend on those products and services in that year. So it's going to include some markups, it's going to include any sort of value-added services that they may add on top. Perhaps even better for our space, as Peter was alluding to, the slow and steady, that growth rates that we continue to see, is that Pro AV is expected to grow at about 5.7% annually through 2024. If you do the quick math, that's about double what most people are expecting for GDP. That gets us to around $325 billion. A really large number that any one of us in this space may say, well, you know, my business is better or worse, smaller, large, etc. But that context is what allows us to see tremendous growth as individual businesses. Some will perform well, some will perform not as well, but a lot of it comes down to the diversity of opportunity that we're kind of talking about and sifting through today. Four key trends really kind of emerge from our research, and full credit to our partner in this regard, who has a tremendous amount of expertise in the underlying product categories that allows us to percolate this up to overall trends. That's Informa Markets, previously known as IHS Market. They've been our data partner in helping cobble together a lot of these forecasts. They helped escalate four trends in our research that we're really seeing as kind of fabric for the show. Peter talked about GDP already. Because we are such a diverse industry serving all the underlying industries out there, whether it's government, education, healthcare, transportation, hospitality. So the list goes on, and you can quickly see that we therefore represent those economies on a global basis. We're going to look a lot like, for the most part, what those economies are doing. We feel that we're in a very good position though right now as an industry because we have such a breadth of solutions to offer and there's such demand, some of it because of the experience economy and other sorts of things, remote work, etc., that are allowing us to perform better than GDP in pretty much every economy out there. A couple other things, you're going to see a lot of technologies, and of course the buzz in our industry for, gosh, decades probably at this point, is AV over IP. We all know that we're now working with IP-based systems, networks that we have to use to be able to distribute content, issue command, collaborate, etc. So that is obviously a key theme in terms of product development. More and more product sets are offering that kind of capability to be able to distribute. It's changing the nature of our work. We also have to now have skills that allow us to be able to work with these technologies. If you ask, Peter and I, going to Infocom, ask around, what kinds of things are you here to learn about? Same thing here at ISE. And one of the most important things, or the biggest areas of interest, is in this IP-based types of technology and protocol. They want to become more familiar to be able to capitalize on that for their business. That leads to services. So with this change in technology, with this robust need for compelling experiences out in businesses, what comes with that is a need for more service. Whether that's traditional installation, consultation, design, etc., or on the more cutting edge, managed services, cloud-based services, all that sort of thing is part of the fabric of what we're looking at today. Last but not least, you're going to see the largest, the bigger, better, higher resolution, thinner, more affordable display technologies here and at every show. That's an important trend because it's allowing what some may say the world to be paved by displays. We're seeing displays show up in so many different places, and that's a key driver of what's happening. In terms of regional breakdowns, Peter talked about this a little bit in terms of which economies are performing more or less successfully. America's had been the story. So coming from North America, that's a lot of the forecasts in the past had been that the Americas was the single largest market for Pro AV. But thanks to compound growth rates in GDP and other sorts of expansions in APAC, we've now pulled forward that day in which we're now saying that APAC is the single largest market for Pro AV. You can't quite see it in this slide as dramatically, but now over almost $91 billion market, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 7.1% versus 4.7% for the Americas. MEA also seeing some tremendous growth. This is, of course, off of a smaller base, but that's what tends to happen. You see that robust expansion. We also see, of course, continued growth in Europe, even if it is among the more challenging economies. That slow and steady is what pays off, though. Despite headwinds, despite more economic challenges, we do see continued growth in that area. In terms of the markets, we alluded to this a little bit here and there, which markets might be more or less attractive in any sort of period of downturn. We cover a number of them here. So think of these each as application areas for technology. The traditional one that our space always talks about, which is also a little bit nebulous, is corporate. What we mean by this often is more of the office environment. So you can almost think of any one of these as also individual environments in which technology is thriving. Corporate, of course, office collaboration spaces, media and entertainment is your broadcast facilities, venues and events would be your stadiums, your auditoriums, retail, on down the line. Where you're seeing some fantastic growth is in some perhaps non-traditional spaces for us. Transportation, hospitality, healthcare, energy and utility. I think Peter alluded to the fact that healthcare in particular is one of those areas where you just have continued need for investment. We all get sick. Of course, we're following the headlines about virus and other sorts of threats, but even just beyond that, the day-to-day, with aging populations across the globe, that is something that there will be tremendous investment in. Not all of these are easy to go after. They require new skills. They require familiarity with new technologies, but all of that is happening out there. Cinema as well, tremendous amount of growth in, these figures are of course MEA, so you can see where we're seeing tremendous growth, or EMEA. We have talked a lot about in the past, and when you walk around a trade show, you see individual ingredients, technologies, displays, speakers, microphones, etc. But what we are increasingly talking about at AVIXA is a solutions-oriented approach. So we've divided up the market, not just by where's the technology ending up, applications, verticals, but by those solutions. Conference and collaboration being the largest in EMEA, $10.8 billion. Digital signage coming in fast, $8.9 billion. Actually, across the globe, we expect that digital signage will be the largest solution area by the time we reach 2024. Some other phenomenal growth areas, performance entertainment, command and control. These are perhaps newer to some, but are phenomenal opportunities. I would say performance entertainment is in some ways a return to roots. So we're seeing a reinvestment or an increased level of investment in fixed entertainment facilities. Whether it's a venue deciding, I need to not take a chance with the technology, I don't want to necessarily rent it, I want to install and know what I'm working with. So we're seeing that kind of happen out in the marketplace. Okay, so I want to pull that closer. So we've talked about solutions as kind of the bundling of technology. Let's bring it a little closer to the show itself. So one thing we were interested in is how does this kind of lens of solution and vertical overlay with our show. This is from the ISE app and on the website. This is their show map. And if you have taken a look at that, you'll note that you can actually select by product category, in some cases solutions like digital signage, etc. This show is broken up by some solution areas, so what I've actually highlighted in the red, keep that in mind, the red color kind of indicating a product category, in this case digital signage. So if you can kind of keep this in your mind of the various zones, as I go through the next slides, I've pulled a couple of examples of solution areas and how the technologies, how the companies are aligning with that. So we'd start with the largest kind of globally and in EMEA as well, conference and collaboration. As I noted before, this is a $10.8 billion opportunity for EMEA Pro AV companies, growing at about 3%. Compound annual growth rate. But if you look at the slide, and I'm kind of blocking it a bit for those of you on this side, but the number of exhibiting companies are all highlighted in red that are actually focusing on conferencing and collaboration here at ISE. About 327 exhibiting companies in this space. You can see that that breaks out a number of different ways from the revenue perspective, whether it's auto conferencing systems, cloud-based solutions. We know that's been a tremendous development and advancement, with more and more of these services being offered online versus through a hardware component. So we've seen that kind of shift in investment more towards the cloud infrastructure. video conferencing systems, presentation collaboration hardware. So you can see quite a diversity of products and on a fairly even split in terms of the revenue proportions that are a part of it. As I mentioned before, perhaps the newest to some in our category is this idea of media servers. The fact that so many now are having to work with back-end systems and technologies that perhaps strain prior skill sets and capabilities within a company. Let's take a look now at digital signage. So, as I noted before, digital signage was perhaps ranked number 2 in EMEA in terms of revenue, 8.9 billion, growing at about 5.3% compound annual growth rate through 2024. But we have a number of more companies actually here exhibiting in this space. This has been quite the boom for the industry as displays have advanced, as back-end systems have advanced, as content has advanced to be able to feed all of these hungry displays. So you'll see in red the number of companies, 557 exhibiting companies who are focused on some aspect of digital signage. How that breaks out is somewhat expected. There's a large chunk of that, about 24, almost a quarter of which comes from the flat panel displays. That makes sense. Digital signage is first and foremost a display opportunity, but right behind it is that server technology again. We like to say you put a lot of displays in place, they're hungry, they need content, they need a way of distributing that content to them, and so therefore media server technology is another large investment area. It's actually that category the category that falls within, we call streaming media storage and distribution, is globally the largest chunk of Pro AV investment. Behind that is the newcomer LED video. You're going to see a lot of advancements there, improvements in supply chain, improvements in resolution, decreased costs, etc. But services also come into the mix. Our top 4 trends, once again, the investment in the value add, the installation, the consultation of those products. So 11% of investment happening in AV installation. Last but not least, I picked live events and performance entertainment. Sort of cousins in this industry. On the one hand, our performance entertainment, as I mentioned before, a fast-growing category of fixed investment. Concert halls, auditoriums, etc., investing in technology. Live events that being that temporary rental and staging of the equipment in our marketplace. So respectively, about $8.2, $5.8 billion in EMEA in terms of Pro AV investment. Well, you'll note that live events actually is growing at a slightly lower rate, 4.4% versus 9.3% for performance entertainment. Once again, we see that reflects this shift towards more of an ownership model in our space, where companies are actually deciding to buy technologies. Perhaps they still will work, of course, with rental and staging and resource companies to help put on the event, design the event, staff the event, manage the equipment, strike it at the end. All those sorts of things are happening that we've just seen a shift in investment away from the hardware more towards the service side in that space. How that breaks out in terms of revenues, once again, we see media servers flowing in there, but a tremendous investment in lighting fixtures. Rental and staging is where you're going to see the dollar proportion that's really attributable to the actual rental of the equipment. So we haven't double counted there. We separate actually the investment a rental and staging company might make in hardware from the additional revenue they would then get from leasing of the equipment. So that's broken out in the data. So in terms of number of companies, another bellwether for our industry, you'll see highlighted in red, kind of clustered over on the far side of the exhibit halls, 400 exhibiting companies in that space. Okay, so we're going to turn it back now to perhaps the other side of the story, and actually we heard Michael Blackman even comment on this last night, people, resources.
Yeah, so obviously you guys are in large part here for all the technology, the amazing electronical equipment that surrounds us, but it's easy to get a little lost in that and forget that the AV talent that shows up here is arguably the top resource. Sean mentioned the official theme at ISE is the people here. As you walk around, as you learn about the technology, make sure you're interacting and getting the benefit that's possible for that. It's a little cliche perhaps at first to say like, oh, the people are the top resource here. But actually our market research shows that that is a well-chosen theme and genuinely one of the most important pieces here for businesses. We did a huge survey trying to understand our members, their businesses, at the end of last year, and AV integrators told us that their number one business challenge was recruiting and retaining qualified staff. So the availability of AV talent is a challenge. Uh, so far, businesses have tried to solve that issue with creativity, with their heads rather than just with their wallets. Um, a little less investment and just buying the top talent off the market, and preference for maybe spending a little more time searching, preferring to bring in workers who have shown a passion, shown willingness to learn, but don't yet have those skills, can learn on the job. So my kind of encouragement, advice to you as you're at this show for the next few days is to talk to the people around you. Bring up your pain points, the challenges you're seeing. Ask them about their pain points, the challenges they're experiencing, how they've solved these worker shortages, training excited new workers who are passionate about our industry. I think you'll find a lot of solutions, a lot of opportunities, ideas to bring back to your business that can be every bit as critical and perhaps even more so than all the relationships and with sales folks and all the new technology stats you're going to learn about from the booths at the show here the next few days. Sean?
Thanks, Peter. And we'd be certainly remiss if we didn't add to that conversation that certainly AVIXA takes that very much to heart. We have our foundation work that's also trying to address some of those challenges with resources to attract people into our industry. So you'll see some of that actually at our booth as well as we talk through kind of resource, talent, attracting talent, developing them from a career path perspective. So just a few takeaways, and for those of you coming to the next session, if you're here for that, just to let you know, they were not able to make it, so we're going to run a little bit long. So we beg your forgiveness if we take a little more of your time, just to close ourselves out today. So I think the point we wanted to make from this industry perspective, the telling the story of the industry about the industry behind the show, is to really show you the strength and diversity that this space really represents. It's not just a technological one. It's not just individual ingredients. It's the markets that we serve and the opportunities that that represents. It's also the solutions that can be brought to bear. At our backdrop, we have this strong GDP that, despite some concerns and talk about potential recessionary threats in the near future, I think the data that we continue to see is rather than dip into that true recession of back-to-back quarters of decline, we expect perhaps just a slowing down of some of the growth rates on a global basis. Regardless, we've painted a picture that our industry is very robust against those downturns because we have such a diversity of opportunity in the space. Challenge that, look for it. We had a great speaker last night who was talking about thinking out of the box and looking for new opportunities. This is a great space to be able to do that in, to think creatively about your business. And all the different ways in which that can happen, whether it's geographic expansion, market expansion, solution development, skill set development, etc. I think one of the key drivers that we're seeing from that, it's perhaps an overused word in our space as we talk about it, staff a lot, is experience. But the fact is, economists and trend followers, future purveyors of future are talking about the fact that we are in this experience economy right now. That's a great place for us as an industry because we're facilitating a lot of those experiences. Technology is a key part, as even in the research that we're seeing where we ask consumers about their individual experiences, whether it's at trade shows or at concerts, etc. And of course, AV technology plays an intrinsic role in that. Has to be somewhat invisible in some cases and facilitate, not be the star, but certainly supporting cast or structure behind it. But it's a part of that mix. So we certainly want to continue this conversation with you. Actually, Peter and I will be back here on Friday to take a different perspective on the trends. What you just saw is more about the show and the technologies. As you all know, we're moving to Barcelona in 2021. So we wanted to talk about regional differences in what we're seeing with trends, how these overall industry figures break down by subregions within EMEA, whether it's MEA, Sub-Saharan Africa, DACH, Central Europe, etc. So we're going to pull that apart and end with some thoughts around the Spanish market as well and how that's doing. So we invite you to come back. It's Friday morning, I believe we're at 10, right? Same place, please do come there and join us. We've put up the hashtag, you've probably seen it ad nauseum at this point, but hashtag AVIXA Intel. Certainly tweet, text, we'd love to have a conversation with you about these trends. You can email any one of us. Some of my counterparts here are here too. If you're interested in learning more about the specific research opportunities and products that we have, you can certainly come by our booth. You can email Holly Klarman, myself, Peter, etc. We'd be happy to have that conversation with you. They're actually here as well. And of course, come to our website, www.avixa.org, Insights, Market Intel. Thanks so much, and we hope you enjoy ISE.
Thank you, everybody.